Hi Kenra, I'm Lo Wheeler, your color ambassador, and today's tutorial is gonna be so fun. We're going to be taking a minimalist approach using bold balayage placement. I love this technique because it's really perfect for girlies with a ton of density, thickness, and length, but it's really user-friendly for you to get a client like this in and out with bold results. So let's get into it. Okay, so we have two large diagonal sections. As we can see, we want to build color around her hairline first and then incorporate into the interior. This is going to help us be really quick and efficient with our placement. Our next subsection is now going to address her hairline. We're looking at the part line to just over the ear. This is going to give us more focus around her face. To make this even easier for me, I'm going to divide this subsection into two. Now I'm gonna take my blue powder plus 30 volume and holding this section tight and just behind her shoulder, I'm going to start applying the lightener in a panel. And as I apply the panel, I'm just going to be mindful to feather it towards her hairline so it's just really soft and blended. Feathering makes it easier to shadow root softly. So I'm laying a generous amount of blue powder onto this section. You want your lightener to be very saturated and you want the product to hold moisture in it, because the faster the lightener dries out, that's the point where lifting stops. So we want to mix appropriately to achieve the most lift. As I work the product down towards the ends, I'm just sliding my hand down to the tip of the hair, and at the very end of the section, I'm just gonna paint and make sure that I'm continuing the saturation evenly all the way through the ends. So how I'm gonna keep this nice and tidy is I'm gonna lay it just behind her shoulder. What you can do to ensure an even softer blend is you can take the end of your teasing comb and you can just subtly finesse each section with either the bristles or the end. Again, when you do that, you're making it so the product will dry. So if that's not what your goal is, then that's something you're gonna want to plan for. I'm going to be creating a soft shadow for her so I can ultimately do this without worrying. Now we're gonna move on to the top section and we're going to follow the same process. Sectioning is really key to a clean application. So I'm making sure that I'm taking my comb and grabbing as many crosshairs as I can in her hairline. For this top section, I'm creating a very slight angle here to really build a soft, lived-in money piece. Now that I'm at the end of this section, I'm gonna go ahead and place it right over the last. I like to take the end of my brush to prop the section up. If your client has thin, fine hair and the hair won't stand up on its own, you can easily use a piece of cotton to create separation. Now that we're here, we're going to do the exact same application on the other side. Placing my hand just behind that section, I'm going to smooth and draw that lightener all the way through the ends. And as I work the product through the ends, I'm making sure that I'm guiding it behind her so that there's no hair buckling in front of her or getting lightener on her face. Moving along, we're going to be treating this interior section right above the ear. To merge it into that money piece, I'm going to create a high peak right here, moving into the length. As I hold this section, I'm going to start in the mid shaft for the most control as I lay the lightener into the section. In this section, I decided to maintain the interior in this triangle area to be able to offer more contrast in the overall effect. So to keep it symmetrical, we're going to keep this pattern on the other side. Now that we're here, so I'm gonna take this triangular section and I'm going to cut right across the top of it, leaving this section as an interior depth. This whole interior section will be blended in the toning process. Here, I'm going to take one subsection. We'll paint a panel through the subsection and then continue with that same approach on the section above it. Here, I'm going to change my brush size to match the size of the section. This is going to allow me to load much more product onto the brush and glide it smoothly and quickly along the surface. I start my placement in the mid shaft and feather it up towards the root transition. This is going to allow a softness that supports a nice blend, and it's marrying into the boldness as we see heavier saturation through the mids. Now we're ready to move along to the next subsection, and we're going to carry this theme along the top. To make sure that this is a clean section, I'm just making sure that I'm combing through so that I can grab the hair evenly. I'd like to point out that this section's gonna come up at a high point here. And initially, when we did her money piece section and dropped it at a diagonal, this is gonna create a very beautiful softness that supports the money piece. When I'm working on the top crown section, I always ask my client to tilt their head towards their shoulder so that I'm not overexerting myself and my body position is strong. Also, at the top most visible sections of the hair, I make sure that I mix fresh lightener so that it's at its peak lifting ability. I'm putting the cotton in a vertical so that it supports the whole section from top to bottom. Just as we did on the other side, this interior section will be blended out in the toning. To move the product down a large section like this, I'm starting to work with my elbow versus my wrist. When you work in small areas, using your wrist will help you to control your placement, and in large areas, using your elbow will also help you to control your placement. Again, to create a little bit of separation between these two sections, I'm going to add cotton in a vertical placement to keep our sections and results neat. Here's a look at the front placement and sides. Okay, so at this point, we're going to address her underneath piece and then drop in her top crown to connect and merge all of the back quadrants together to connect to the front. To address the underneath and make sure that we have some lift, I'm going to be painting this whole entire section, and it's going to relate really well to her front money piece. To do this, I'm going to comb the section and over direct it up. This section takes full commitment. You want to make sure that you have a really good handle on the section so that you can apply evenly and quickly. Initially, when you try this placement, you might want to use your comb to soften the perimeter as you get used to your body positioning. Now as I drop this section, I'm going to add a little bit of cotton just under the section so that it doesn't hit the neck. Now we're going to look at the rest of her hair as a whole. She has such a good amount of hair, and my whole goal is not to get lost in the weeds with this. I want to just make sure this top veil connects to her hair as a whole. So I'm looking at her outcome as if I'm standing 10 feet away versus in the weeds of each section by section. So I'm going to subsection this big block of hair, and just like we did on the sides of her hair along the crown, I'm going to create a rectangle section. Knowing that a large panel will fall in the middle of this section, I'm going to create 2 visual subsections on the outer corners of each length. This is going to tie in the look of all the tones, and we'll really be able to get a variegated soft effect once we get into the toning process. I'm going to take a rounded subsection, and the way I'm taking the section isn't meant to be at the root, it's meant to take an adequate amount of hair towards the ends. So we're connecting 2 pieces of color to hold the weight of that middle section. Notice how for these long sections, I am using more of my elbow to sweep the product on. This allows me to work really smooth and quickly. This bulk of hair left out is going to be the mid-tone. Now that we're at our final section, we're going to divide this into 2 subsections. Now that we're done with her application, I'm going to look for 40 to 45 minutes of processing time for these last pieces. I want them to marry into our money piece and complement it. So ultimately I'll be looking for similar levels of lift, but I'll be okay if there's 1 to 2 levels between them. That's just gonna change how I approach her toning. To tone her shadow root, we selected 5 in, and we're going to be mixing that half and half with 5 in UA. That's going to create a really soft and deliberate shadow that helps us blend all the tones together. I'm going to divide her hair into quadrants and start with the shadow root in the back. So in the interior of her hair, there is a drop off between her root and the pre-light inside. So I'm gonna take the shadow root and blend through that whole section, and we're gonna comb it through for a softer effect. And then through the ends of this section, I have my 9 PV that I'll be applying with my larger brush. In this area of the head, we want to maintain interior depth. That's why I subsectioned out the blonde on the crown. And that is also why we're taking vertical subsections so that I can neatly blend out that interior with the 5 in, 5 in UA. Now that we're working towards the front, I don't need to overly tone out these really nice pale areas. So I'm just gonna work on shadowing the interior on the other side And lastly, we'll bring down the blondest pieces in each section and tone those last. Now that we have the interior section toned on each side, it's now time to shadow root and blend this top veil that we've created. The shadow root in the interior has been dropped lower because there was a bigger gap in the color, and to create that really nice veil of highlights, we're doing a shorter shadow root. So at this point, we're just going to watch it as it develops, and we'll be rinsing within 1 to 3 minutes. Here is our beautiful blended balayage results. Let's do a little recap. So we were able to build so much dimension with our blue powder lightener plus 30 and diagonal bold pieces. And to blend in her natural base, we used 5N and 5 NUA, half and half, and did an all over glaze with my favorite 9PV. If you love this technique, please be sure to subscribe to Kenra Professional right here on YouTube, because there's so many more amazing tutorials just like this. Thanks so much for watching, and you can follow me on Instagram at @low_Wheeler Davis.